All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to another of Early Music America's webinars. We try to do about one of these a month at least, and we're very, very happy this month to be presenting to so many of you who have registered, and I'm sure some others will be joining us, and we'll be making this available on our YouTube channel following the conclusion of the webinar. Within a little bit, we'll get that onto the YouTube channel. You can find a link to our YouTube by going to earlymusicamerica.org. My name is David Wood. I'm the programs director for Early Music America, and I would like to welcome and thank our presenter for today, Dr. Claire Garabedian. Dr. Garabedian is a professional cellist specializing in historical performance practice and has been seen with many ensembles in the US and in the UK, including Philharmonia Baroque, Seattle Baroque, American Bach Soloists, Boston Baroque, Handel and Haydn Society, and many, many others. Claire is also a certified therapeutic musician, and will give you a link to more information about that shortly, and also completed some doctoral work, or her doctoral work, focusing on the subject, or at least part of the subject for today, which is this intersection between music and dementia, and families and staff and individuals who have dementia. And I know a lot of you who have registered wrote with some very specific experiences that you had, and we will be taking questions throughout the webinar in the chat feature. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be addressing those questions. But instead of having you remember the entire time, please just go ahead and put those in the chat whenever you think of them, and we'll come back to those at the end. We'll save around 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions, and then we'll also share a link to Claire's website. So if you have more questions or you want to know more about her work, you can reach out to her through her website or find resources there. I'm going to turn this over to Claire, and if anyone has technical issues throughout it, you can send me a private message in the chat. Otherwise, I will see everybody at the end when we get to questions and answers. So, Claire, it's all yours.
Okay, so hello. I might know some of the people that come on here because I lived in the US most of my life until 15 years ago, and I'm now, you're seeing an authentic wee Scottish cottage in Musselburgh, which is just I'm right across from the North Sea, right outside of Edinburgh in Scotland. So, and I'm going to introduce you quickly to my two assistants. This is Rita, who is a 1702 Baroque cello, who I'm very lucky to be taking care of. And the other thing is my my extremely grouchy but able-bodied assistant, Rusty, who will come into this probably at some point. So anyway, I'm going to be talking mostly about the work I've done with music in general, but I'm also this presentation has made me really think about Baroque and early music in particular, and how that's fit into the whole picture. So I'm going to just go ahead to the next slide, which it did on its own. Okay, well, so I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of how I got here. I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm not going to go through Old Home Week here, don't worry. So I started when I was 9, but I played recorder before that for quite a long time with my aunt is Susie Rhodes Morris, which some of you may know, she still sings, but she's not doing it as much publicly, I don't think, in the Bay Area in California. So I grew up hearing early music, her singing early music from as long as I can remember ago, and always really loved it, and started playing what I didn't know was continuo with her when I was really young. So then I continued working on the cello. I played throughout school. I went to New England Conservatory, and I played there. I got serious about the Baroque cello back in 1980. And still don't know quite why I never ended up in Europe until when I did, because that's where I always wanted to go. That's where everything was going on in the late 70s and early 80s. I was in Boston, where a lot was going on as well. So I continue working on the cello. I went back to the Longy School of Music in Boston many, many years later after my bachelor's in Baroque cello, because I wanted to learn the real stuff about what I didn't want to just be playing. I wanted to understand figured bass. I wanted to understand what was going on. So I put myself through learning music theory for real and doing figured bass and Baroque dance, all sorts of things, so that I could understand better what it was to be a Baroque cellist. And I'm very grateful I did that, actually. And then I continued on. I played in all those different groups and chamber music and all that stuff, and played with wonderful people and met wonderful people, and I'm very grateful for that. Moved here to Scotland. It's a long, dramatic story, but I found myself in Scotland in 2007. And when I came here, I was not that young. I was 48, and no, I was 46 when I moved here. So I kind of I did do some interesting. I was asked very early on in my time. I was in St Andrews, Scotland, which has a very strong university. It's basically a university town of 600 years old. And there's an amazing music department there, although it's not for a degree anymore, which actually makes it freer. So I was able to start a Baroque orchestra there. I'd already started one in Seattle that was a community-based one. They asked me to do one in St. Andrews. Both of them are still going, I'm proud to say. And I also taught things. I taught about historical performance basically to the students that were there, most of whom didn't know anything about early music or historical performance. That wasn't part of their world. So I did that. I ended up through a strange set of things because I had also, meanwhile, been trained as a therapeutic musician through an organization in the States, which is a wonderful one I highly recommend, called MHTP. Just look up MHTP because I'll get it wrong if I say the acronym. So, and if somebody wants to write that in the chat, what that actually stands for, so I don't trip over it, please feel free. So I did that because I was very interested in playing at the bedside, mostly of people nearing the end of life. I didn't know anything about dementia at that point, and that was before I moved to Scotland. And it was because I had had amazing experiences as a cellist, finding, as I was aging, so were, the parents, especially of people that I grew up with, and they were getting sick and they were dying. And I also took care of an amazing man. I guess I was a caregiver of some sort for an amazing man who died when he was 102, and I played at his bedside while he was dying. And I played for him very often during the last 2 years of his life, and he was very, very coherent. So again, dementia was not part of any of this. So I realized when I played at the bedside of people who were nearing the end of life that this was like a whole nother thing. This was much more deep and meaningful and important than playing concerts for me. It was like, okay, there's something else going on here. I need to understand this better. I did go do MHTP and became a certified music practitioner, certified therapeutic musician, and I started playing in hospices. And then I moved to Scotland where there was none of this work available. But I was still very, very keen and interested. And what I did find was an enhanced palliative care course that was a distance learning master's course at Stirling University, 2 hours away from where I was living, kind of in the center of Scotland. So I took that course. I was the only one that wasn't a nurse. I'm totally squeamish, so I couldn't even listen to what they had to tell me about what they did. But it was fascinating. I learned how to write essays, something I also didn't know because I was a music major. And I was in the US. Everybody here knows how to write essays from when they're like 5, it seems. So I took this course. I learned a lot about communication, and we did some very interesting essay work. It was really, it really kept me going in those first couple of years. Meanwhile, I was doing some playing with Dunedin Consort, which I'm very grateful to have done, and I got to play the St. Matthew with some amazing players here and other things. And I found myself at the end of that course, the teacher that was my teacher for a section that was on dementia and palliative care asked if I'd ever thought about doing a PhD, and I laughed into the phone and said, "You've got to be kidding. Why are you even asking me that?" And she said, "Well, it's a really interesting topic that you're interested in," because I always slipped it into my essays. I always slipped in something about music in them because I was curious. But she said, and there's these studentships, which are fellowships in American language, coming up, and you could, this is something you should look at. And I decided it was the best gig I could get in town, quite frankly. So I applied and got this PhD studentship. So I got paid, not a lot, but I did get enough to make a living to do a PhD, which is really amazing if you come from my background, let me tell you. So I did that, and I focused on it was through the dementia department, so I knew dementia had to be focused on, but I kept it with palliative care as well. So it was end of life as well. It was in care homes. It was about people. I decided that connection was really interesting for me, and so I made it be that it was about how me playing live or me pre-recorded the same or very similar music at the bedside. So I was present all those times that I played live or recorded, how that affected the relationships of a person living with dementia who was nearing the end of life and someone closely connected to them over many different sessions. And some of the sessions I got waved off, some lasted for an hour and a half. I never knew what was going to happen. So I learned a great deal. It was an amazing experience, and I did amazingly finally get the PhD. And then I worked in the Midlands and did work. So as a researcher in creative arts and dementia, and now I've been living back in Scotland since that post ended after 4 years. And I've been exploring doing things on my own terms that were based on the things that I learned during the work I was doing. So here's a question. I'm going to throw these questions in every now and again because I found these really instructive. I do workshops and all sorts of things. So this is, I'm trying to break it down into a smaller chunk here. But these questions are things to think about. And you can write answers if you want in the chat. Was there ever a genre of music you hated but then grew to adore over time? Because I can tell you that was certainly true for me. But, some people don't have that, but a lot of people do. Could also do it with food. Now I'm going to talk briefly about dementia. I'm just going to give you, dementia is a long topic that we could be here for 5 days straight and we wouldn't be anywhere. Really, we won't have covered much ground. So I'm just going to say one thing I do want you to take away from here is that dementia is the umbrella, and in that umbrella, under that, Alzheimer's is but one kind of dementia. It's not a different disease than dementia. It's just a kind of dementia. We could go into the whole political reason of why Alzheimer's is the thing, and people, especially in the US, but also here a lot, go, dementia, Alzheimer's, they're two different things. Dementia or Alzheimer's, it's not. Alzheimer's is a kind of dementia. There are many, many, many kinds of Alzheimer's, and there are many, many, many other kinds of dementias. So vascular dementia is one where it's steps, vascular heart, closing of vessels. And so someone's fine, and then they all of a sudden have a loss of memory, particularly, and then they're fine, and then it changes again. Lewy body is a particularly odd one, and it can have hallucinations and a funny gait. It's related sometimes to Parkinson's. And then the other one is that I'm just going to mention is frontal temporal. It used to be called Pick's disease, but that one's interesting just because that's young. That's usually the kind that younger people get, meaning that it's often referred to as young onset of dementia. And it's because if you're like 40s, 30s, 50s, and you get dementia, that's not biologically what's supposed to happen. If you're in your 80s, that's not particularly surprising. It's our bodies break down in various ways, and that's one of them. It's not, that's just how it is. But Frontal Temporal is also kind of amazing as a musician because I've played for a number of groups. Actually, in London, I was brought down to do something, and it was fabulous because in a very staid culture like England, London, or Scotland, really, where it's very, staid is the word I'm going to use. They lose all inhibitions. That's generally one of the first signs with frontal temporal, and that can be not easy if you're a carer and if you're a family member, but it can also be a blast if you use it right. And if you're a musician, it's great because there's this incredible openness to trying new things and doing things in expression. So, it's those ironies. But if you take one thing home, remember, Alzheimer's is but one kind of dementia. And so continue teaching others that. It'll help lots of people get less confused. But dementia is about human beings, and this is important. This is a response. I did this slide a while ago for a response when I went to an entire 3-hour seminar of music and dementia, really eager to learn what people were doing. And I tell you, in those 3 hours, not a person was in sight. There were numbers and charts, and I couldn't even believe it. It was so unbelievable that there were no people in sight. There was no music and there were no people. It was just numbers and charts. And that's not how I work, that's for sure. So it's about a human being. Each person is a human being. And this is just a really important thing to think about with dementia. Modern dementia care is the move from the death that leaves the body behind to living well with dementia. So it's like so many other things. You get a diagnosis of something, whether it's a dementia, a mental health issue, something that's not curable and could get worse, or could stay the same for a long time and there's no way to know. So you can either wring your hands and completely, give up on this person immediately and say, well, that's them. Or you can try to figure out the positives, like what are the things that person still can do? What are the things that are different, like that disinhibition? Well, what can you do to work with that, for instance? So that's really important. That's been a big shift. Used to be people with dementia was just shoved into a warehouse. They were warehoused literally. And this is really important, this flower, because this is what I came back to, even though I tried not to. When I was doing my PhD, I tried to avoid this because Kitwood is anybody who's doing dementia work in this country or the US or anywhere else probably would have to know about Kitwood. Kitwood was a very far-seeing professor. He died rather young. He was the first person to really talk about looking at people with dementia as people, and not as objects or that they were already gone. He was very much about the person, and person-centered care was his thing that he brought into all dementia care. It has that now. It certainly should. And this flower is his belief that all people have basic human needs for comfort, identity, occupation, inclusion, attachment, and in the center is love. And when I did my work, I ended up having to go back to this because it was the only way I could make sense of what was going on with these connections going on with these people in my study. So that's a really important thing. And I'll probably come back to that as I do now we're going to get into the music. So, but I will say one more important thing, and I love this. This is from Kitwood. When you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. And that's why, as a researcher with my research hat on, it's really frustrating and difficult because it's so heterogeneous in terms of every person is different. They bring their history, their health stuff, their family dynamics, they bring everything with them into dementia. So you can't have 6 people diagnosed with dementia and even the same kind of dementia and even being the same age and even being the same culture. Even if you had those 6 people in the room, I can tell you there'd be some similarities and there'd be a whole lot of not similarities. So then you bring music into the mix, which is, as we know, because everybody here is obviously interested in music, that's got its own things. Everything is different. Everybody, do you like to listen to the same music every day? Usually by the time someone's out of being about 1.5 or 2, they're not listening to the same music over and over again, and so you might like something one day and not listen to it again for another month. You might not, listen. It's not something that is prescribed where you can really guarantee that somebody without dementia is even going to like the playlist or the suggestions you make from day to day. So why would we think that someone with dementia, I can just write out a little list of things and that's going to work the same every day? Not a chance. So it's difficult to prove to doctors and medical people. Whoops, sorry. It's very sensitive. I have to be very careful here. That it's going to be individual and it's going to change. So here's the thing. Why music? Because first of all, for me, one of the most important is the time transport. This was one of the things I worked with a lot of in my work. I saw this happen on, and some of you may be kind of looking at this a little weird. It's pretty clear if you think about it. One is go after this talk, sit in somewhere where there's a radio, put on 70s stuff, rock, pop. I don't care if you liked it. I don't care if you listened to it when you were whatever was on in the 70s, 80s, whenever you were a teenager in your young 20s. If you listen to the pop stuff from that time when you were that age, I am going to guarantee you that within about, let's give you 5 songs. I'll give you 5 songs. You're going to hit on one where there's going to be all sorts of memories that are going to come flooding back. You're going to know all the words. You're going to wonder, I can show you a picture of what happened on your sister's wedding 40 years ago. But if you hear a piece that was played at that wedding, I can tell you that's going to take you right back. You're going to remember the weather. You're going to remember what everybody was wearing, what you were eating, what was happening. Music has incredible power to do that for us, whether it's a classical piece or whatever. It doesn't matter whether you're a performer or not. There's pieces that take me back. I'm on the stage playing that piece. I can remember those people. I might not have thought about them for years. And there they are. I can see them frozen in that time. But it's also time transport in the way that we all go to concerts. We all play concerts. A lot of us do on here. Time, it has another part, which is that if you have 5 people going to a concert and let's just say for this group, let's say something nice and bulky like the St. Matthew, that's a good 3-hour chunk of time. Now you're going to this concert, it's great, groups playing it, you're really excited, you're going to go see this. It's your favorite piece. You're going with 5 other people. One of them's just had a bad breakup. One of them's just really hurt their back. Someone else is having a great time. They just started a relationship. This is their piece they're studying right now, and they're very excited because this group is something they really want to hear. You all go to this concert, you stay for the same amount of time and experience the same piece. I can assure you that all of you will have experienced it in a different length of time. For some, it will feel like you were just totally involved and it went by. And for some, it's going to feel like, that person who just had a breakup or who had a bad back, that's going to feel like an awfully long 3 hours, and that we bring that to everything we do, whether it's, if you're terrified in this performance and you just want it to end, that's going to be a long time on that stage. If you're really into it and it goes past, it's not going to feel that way. So time transport works in those both ways. And when we're playing for somebody, whether it's an audience, so everything that I say about dementia is relevant because dementia is one of the hardest things when someone's got advanced dementia of whatever kind, because they all share that it's about memory and communication problems, difficulties. If you can connect with somebody with music who has advanced dementia, you can be, anything that applies for that applies for when you're performing for anybody, any group, 20 people, 500 people, it doesn't matter to me anyway. I think that that's one of the things that I really learned was, it's been told to me before, but it's not about us when we perform. We learn our instruments so that we can do this thing of conducting something. We are the minstrels. I mean, we are the ones who, like actors, like all sorts of different people, we're the musicians, we put that out there. And when people come to a concert, you don't get to have that intimate one-on-one, but it is the same thing. There's going to be someone there who may never have heard that piece or that instrument for that matter before. And there's going to be someone there that this may be the last time they hear anything. You don't know. So it's not about you anymore. It's about telling that story. And the time transport is a really important part of that, I think. It is also a nonverbal, I know, we're talking about when I play the cello. Okay, it is a verbal language. There's lots of vocal music, and it is relevant to this too. But it's also a universal language in the sense that a lot of it is nonverbal. And even when it is with words, I mean, I've played a lot of wonderful music in various languages that I certainly don't speak, and I actually can't tell you exactly what they were singing, but I certainly, the non-verbalness of the affect of that music and the way it was spoken, which we're going to go to in a minute, is very important to the experience to me. So it's still, even when it's verbal, even when it's singing, is a nonverbal communication in a certain way, I think. So, and I'm just putting on this one. This is not the only reasons music, but these are the three big ones. It's known, there's research on this. It can be used to alleviate or distract from all forms of pain. People use it for distraction from physical pain. We use it for distraction from emotional pain and physiological pain, but also to go deeper into those pains. You know, there's been whole studies about why we listen to sad music when we're sad. You know, there's lots of writing about that because we do that. Although sometimes you want to just hear something happy clappy and forget about the sad things. So you can do all sorts of things with music that way. So I wish I wouldn't do this, but okay. There we go. Okay. So now I can't see the top of my slide, but that's okay. That's funny. Anyway, so what I'm saying here, I started thinking more about specifically early music, and I thought I would just mention that, you know, when I was doing this PhD, one of the gifts was that I really did get to choose what I wanted to do. And my two supervisors, who were fantastic, I'm still very close to them, but they didn't know anything about music in this. Like, that was not their thing. That was not at all their thing. They knew all about research and they taught me an incredible amount, but I didn't get second guessed about what I was doing with music, which was great in a lot of ways. It gave me a lot of leeway. And I came trotting in about 6 months into my first year, and the first year is very fun of a PhD, and then they go down from there in great steps, kind of like vascular dementia, into less fun until you're writing up. But in the first year, you're exploring and reading all this literature and trying to understand what you're going to do, what's going to be the actual study. And I thought I knew what I wanted to do. And then I all of a sudden had this huge, and I don't know why, but I went, no, I want to do a totally different study. And I made this whole case for coming in, and I wanted to compare the effects of pentatonic scale work, which is the basis of everything from, I mean, it's universal in a big way, but it's also folk and everything else in Celtic music. So pentatonic scale work, Baroque music, and improvisation. That I wanted to compare those three, and my supervisors, being very wise and good, did not let me change it after 6 months. But I'm still curious about that, actually. And so one of the things is that Baroque music, there are papers, and because I'm tangentially affiliated now with a university, but I wasn't for a while, don't have the paper access that I used to. I know that there was a paper from way back then that talked about using Baroque music specifically in a hospital setting. It was the thing that got me, I used that as my example of why I should use Baroque music. But that they found that it was very, as you might expect, calming and soothing. And of course, this is one of the things as a researcher musician that's very frustrating, is lots of researchers do lots of research and they don't consult at all with people who are specialists in the field that they're doing the research on. So it didn't say in that paper what music they used. And I would say we can all agree on this, that, you know, there's a lot of different types of early music. What were they using? That would be, some stuff is not calming. I mean, so you can't just say, well, if you drop the needle on the Baroque, like category on Spotify. It's all going to be calming music. I don't know what they meant by that, but I'm going to say that one thing about Baroque music is it's, there's the repetitiveness, the sequentialness. I'm thinking of chaconnes. They have there's not enough time here to like go, you can listen to things afterwards and look at these slides, but think about chaconnes. There's a bass that keeps going, and there's there's melodies over this ground bass. I'm talking all the time about ground. So Purcell, there's a ton of these. I'm going to try to, in my small little confined office here. Can you hear that okay? Okay, I'm hoping good. Okay, I saw a thumb up. That's good. So here's just something I pulled out from Purcell. Let's see if I can do it in this. And so it goes for the whole rest of the piece. The ground is that, which is lovely, frankly. And that's Purcell from Orpheus Britannicus, Here the Deities Approve. And I thought, and then another one, of course, a favorite for all of us in the cello world. Now I'm going to blank. So, Pachelbel's canon, air on the G string, those sorts of things. It doesn't matter if you know about early music. It doesn't matter if you like early music. The weddings back in the day when I used to do them, I mean, how many weddings did the mother or the wife to be says, I have this brilliant idea. I think we'll do there's that Pachelbel's canon. We'll do that at the wedding. And you have to go, oh, that's a really good idea. Or the air on the G string, that's another really good one. They probably don't listen to early music necessarily at all, but they know those pieces and nobody doesn't like them. And the patterns, now the next one, patterns, the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1, Prelude 1 in C major, that's what they sent up into space in the time capsule. So, and the closest we have is, so the prelude of the first Bach suite, I've never played that anywhere where people didn't love that automatically, ever. Care homes, anywhere. I've never played it anywhere where it's not been loved. And it doesn't matter that whether they knew what it was or anything, it just doesn't matter. A lot of early music, more obviously than some other things, have a storyline, and we're storytellers first and foremost. I've more and more believed that. And beginning, middle, end. There is a beginning, middle, and end. And it's about the harmonies. It's about mostly the harmonies, actually. The way that starts with often a prelude or a prologue or a something, and it goes through and meanders, and then it ends. And anybody, even if they don't know about the music, can understand it. The importance of the words comes back. Articulations mirroring language. Early music is incredible for that. The Monteverdi, I mean, I don't know Italian, but boy, I can listen to that Italian all the time that's sung because it's been set in such a way that the sound of the language comes through. Handel, I mean, the Messiah, when it's done right, according to me anyway, right, it's got the words are in the music, the way we articulate with the bows. The bows are made to be articulating more. It's just got a much more Schütz set German like nobody else. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And Bach, I mean, I'm just naming a few. Believe me, I know, and I'm not even thinking about Rameau. I mean, French music. I mean, it's a totally other language, and it's that setting of music to language that's so important. And then the rhythmic predictability, as my mother calls it, toe tappers. You think of Vivaldi, he would have been a billionaire now because he was a pop artist. I mean, he wrote serious works, but he also wrote like all these pieces. The Gloria, everybody loves the Gloria. If you play that for somebody, they're moving their head because it's accessible, I guess is the best, easiest way to say. And then the emotional content of these things, and one that comes to mind immediately for me is a Barmedich from St. Matthew Passion. There's just this expression in it. And you'll have this to look at. Go ahead and listen to things. If you don't know any of these, you won't be wasting your time. So that is something that early music, I'm talking about Baroque music. I'm not talking actually, let's stick with Baroque because it's what I know best. Medieval music is a whole nother thing. There's loads there, but that's for someone else that's got more specialty there. But for this music, it can touch somebody. It doesn't matter. There's these fence posts that are easy to hold on to whether you know the music or not. There's these funny articles that I did find that were about the effects of ambient Baroque music on patients with dementia. And these are, you don't need to, the jargon. Anyway, they did find in this, I have no idea again what they played, and they may or may not tell you in the article, but we measured adverse patient behaviors. I could talk about that for a long time. I don't believe in those. But anyway, it's considered as a good, non-invasive, cost-effective, and pleasant. It's pleasant for patients and staff alike. And they always want larger random controls, which can't happen in this venue for what I talked about earlier. But it is about the idea that staff also, they've shown a lot of times, can be very fulfilled by having there be early music playing, when I say Baroque music, for the same reasons I had in that other slide. Here's one where they say to study the effect of Baroque music in people with dementia. Another one where it's interesting. Again, have no idea what they played, and they probably don't tell you during this, but they did play it. And the thing is, they did find in this one, I read a little more that's not shown on this, where they found in this one that for a few of the people that were in this study, which they actually don't really tell you how many were in it either, that it had it disturbed them. And that was the contrary to previous results. And we could talk about this. I'm just going to say about music in general, including Baroque music. Again, you're talking about somebody with dementia, so they don't have the barriers of being polite anymore, which is fantastic. So if you're not feeling like listening to Pachelbel's canon someday, you might throw a pillow across the room at the person. Amen to them. It doesn't mean that they are doing anything wrong. And when I say I don't believe in the adverse behaviors, it's because if you can't speak anymore and you're not being listened to and you can't communicate that you're whatever it is you need to communicate, you're going to be frustrated. I have exercises in my workshop where you actually get to experience that. It's frustrating. And so what they call challenging behaviors, we tend to look at people who are working really in the dementia field as, no, it just means they're not being heard. It's kind of like a little kid who's not getting heard and they get into a thing. So it's the same in that way. So Baroque music, like any other kind of music, might be loved one day. I had this experience many times, and might be really not liked the next day. And you just have to go, okay, all right, that's fine. Here's another little question. Are there any pieces of music so bound up with a particular moment of your life that you can no longer listen to them? Okay, so that's another one to think about. And I think you'll find that there are pieces, and that's another thing. So if I innocently go in and play, there's an anecdote actually of a person who had been a famous or very, very accomplished harpsichordist. She now had dementia. Her nephew was coming in, who was her closest relative, and was very dutiful and was playing tons of harpsichord music recordings for her. And she was getting more and more agitated, but she couldn't speak. And he didn't know what to do. So they called in this amazing woman who's very experienced with therapeutic music on the harp. And she came in not playing any Baroque music or anything at all. She was doing improvising and pentatonic things that you do on a Celtic harp. And she just totally calmed down. And what it turned out was, because it could have been that music may have really upset her because she could no longer play it, may have reminded her of a terrible time in her life. I mean, if I play a piece that's very innocuous, if I play Pachelbel's Canon and you had it played at your wedding and that marriage broke up and was terrible, you might get extremely distraught while I play something as innocent as Pachelbel's Canon. So you can't know that often until you get there, and you just have to respond, and you just stop. You stop when you see distraught. Tears are not distraught. Tears are good in many cases, but distraught is something you have to look for. But so music is incredibly powerful that way, in that way of time transport. It's taking back somebody to something they might not want to go back to. So you have to meet the person where they are. So that person is where they are, and they're in a fine place as long as we allow them to be in that place, whatever it is. And don't try to change it, fix it, cure it. When I'm doing therapeutic music, I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to meet that person, communicate with them where they are. If it calms that person down because they're really agitated, excellent. If it makes them fall asleep, fabulous. If they get really ticked off and send me out of the room packed, that's okay too. It's just where that person is right then. So I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite things that are the tricks of the trade, that these are what happen when we're in an audience as well. So I have to show this because otherwise no thing that I do is complete. This is what entrainment is about. This is when you meet somebody and they're agitated. You don't play a lullaby. You play something that's agitated because you want to get on board with that person and talk to them on the level they're at. And then you might be able to calm it down, but people don't react to trying to play something really calm when somebody's extremely agitated. It's not going to get through. So. So I apologize. I know that's very controversial that was not Baroque music, but I could not. Someday I'll do one with Baroque music, but that made me very happy when I first saw it, because as silly as that is entrainment. Where you get into something, and if you go to a toe tap or Vivaldi thing, though, you're going to go look at everybody's heads when you go and you tell me what's going on. You will see that everybody's entrained with the music. And a good musician is trying to do that for a big audience that they're not in personal contact with. So the other part is the ISO principle, is the other tool that I really think is important, and it's not talked about as much. So this is someone sad. I don't go, and it often care homes here, they see somebody sad and they go, pull your socks up. That's a great Scottish little saying, pull your socks up. So no, you go in, I'm going to play something sad. I am going to play something sad, because what I'm saying there is, in nonverbal communication, I see you, I see you're sad. It's okay to be sad. If I go to a concert and I'm feeling sad, and it happens to be that they're playing Bach 106 Octus Tragicus, that's going to really work for me. But if they're playing the Vivaldi Gloria that night, it might not work too well. And I might really just not get into that concert. It might be the same group and they might be fabulous, but I'm not going to like it because I'm not in that place. Can't control that when you're playing for a large audience, but you just do what you can. But that's really important, really important. So, because what happens in that time travel idea is this idea of flow, which probably some of you know, and IME, which you might not, which is the intense musical experience. So states of seamless absorption, high level focus, and effortless immersion in a pleasurable task. I mean, that's why I love playing early music. When I'm playing with a good group and I'm playing great music, flow. And I think we as performers, when we're in that high state, and I've had it not enough, certainly in a while, is it's addictive. I mean, it is. It's a very and as a continual player, you're in the center. You know, it doesn't matter if I'm playing Pachelbel's Canon and I'm playing the same four notes over and over again. I'm in the center of the music. So if I'm playing a Monteverdi Vespers, I've got a bunch of whole notes and things. I'm not necessarily playing all the frilly stuff. The violins are doing all that wonderful work, but I'm in the epicenter of the chords that are going on, and I feel like I'm singing the entire thing. I'm the entire chorus is the best way I can explain it. And that's same as if you're playing for people as well. People leave their ordinary experience and enter a world that is not comprehensible in rational terms. Beyond logic and knowledge, spatial dimensions and chronological structure ceased to exist. And I saw this when I was playing for people in my PhD study. You know, it was the only way I could explain it. I called it a sonic haven because it was a place where they were removed from where they were. We were in care home bedrooms. They're not very exciting, but we were all moved out of that room into a place where there were no worries. There was complete parity. It wasn't about what someone's dementia was or someone's sore arm or any of that stuff. It didn't matter anymore. We were just connected. And it took us away for a period of time. And then, you know, we're back, and the residual effects were that I heard from staff often that there was a much better sense of mood and sleep. But that's hearsay. I mean, it was anecdotal, and it was really about what was happening in the moment, because that's all you've got with dementia. So that's really important as well. So I love this quote. I wish I could just take it because it is anonymous, but I think enough people know it. With the right music, you either forget everything or you remember everything, which brings us back to that time travel again, in my opinion. So, you know, and here's another last little question. Have you ever heard a piece of music for the first time and instantly loved it? Because it happens to me all the time. And this is relevant because you will hear, if you go to a lot of dementia talks, a lot of the time they talk about playing familiar music, like I spoke about, from that time, that fruitful time of our lives when we're late teenagers and early 20s. And that's all fine and well, and it brings a sense of identity and a sense of place and memories and all that, and that's good. But I always say, I go into a lot of this in much more depth when I do my workshops, but you have to put yourself in people's shoes. And do you honestly want, especially if you get young onset, so you might be only 40 and you could live for another good 30 years, do you want to be told you're never going to experience anything new, you're never going to eat anything new, and you're never going to meet anybody new, you're never going to try anything new? People need to be challenged all through their life in whatever ways they can. And one way we can do it is with music. I improvise. I bring in early music that I like. I bring in things that are familiar. I bring in Celtic tunes that I learn. Because people do just like we would. You know, you're going to like something or you're not going to like something. It's fine if you don't like it. But, you know, if we all have to hear it the first time, and it's very rare that playing something like, you know, something great like the Beam Biner Mass for somebody, it's not going to like that. I mean, you know, honestly, you're not going to like something. Probably you will if you're in the right circumstance. So nearly done. So Rusty is there and wants to know if there's any questions or thoughts, or if anything has sparked your curiosity and how you might apply it in how you approach future performances, because it's also about how we perform as musicians, in my opinion. It all feeds into the same thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire. And we've got some time for questions. So if you have questions, it's easiest if you can put them in the chat, and that way we can make sure, because there may be some that are very the same, we can group them together. If you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. There was a question way in the earlier, what do you tune your cellos to, Claire?
Oh, that's easy. Oops. I have to stop touching that. I'm just tuned right now. I'm just A, D, G, C at 415. I was playing the fifth Bach suite for quite a while, a few months ago, and then of course that was a little bit different tuning. But generally, it's just down at A415. If that answers the question.
Wonderful. Other questions? There was someone who just had some questions about what your thoughts were on the MHTP certification that you went through, and how that was, and how have you? I think the question was it's not necessarily cheap, and they thought, is it worth it? So I think maybe rephrase that as how do you continue to use your certification that you have through MHTP?
I mean, I'd be happy to talk to people after this and also direct them to other people to talk to that might be in your area. It's really only relevant for people in the US. And I learned a lot. I know it's gone up. I don't even know what it is now because I did in 2005 or something. So it's, I know a lot of people that have taken it even recently, and it's gotten to be much more serious. I mean, in terms of, like Longy School of Music now has it as part of their kind of curriculum, and there are amazing musicians I've met in Boston who are now taking the course and getting to play, getting paid jobs. We expect everybody to get paid work, not do it as volunteer if at all possible, because it is about getting it to be a respectable thing, that it's a paid service. I mean, just like we as musicians, we have to learn that what we do is worth monetary. I mean, people put a shingle out to be, I know I'm going to be controversial again, to be life coaches or other things after 6 months of training, and they can charge far more than I can charge for private lessons. I don't know. So it's all about, standing up for it. But I think that what you learn in it, and they're constantly tweaking it and working on it, I think that there's a lot to learn there that helped me as a musician, actually, even, I mean, besides that I was being able to do the work. I hope that helps, but I'm happy to talk to people and direct them to people in their area.
Another question, what's the most astounding or surprising response or reaction you've had working one-on-one with a dementia patient?
Well, I think they'd have to still be from my time at the in my PhD, because I met those people for such a deep time. That's the beauty of a PhD. You get this like long period of time in field work. One man who was so lovely was a very talented amateur, but high level amateur Scottish traditional musician. So I felt very nervous playing for him because I was rather new to Scotland, was learning all this Scottish music, and I was like, it wasn't my language yet. I'd be a lot better at it now than I was then, I can tell you. But I played for him, and sometimes he would play with me, which was fantastic. I have video I can't show to anybody because of the ethics, but playing the accordion with me in this cacophonous, amazing thing we did. But also he would fall asleep sometimes, and he would still be doing, it was great he was sleeping because he hadn't been sleeping for weeks. So this was really great. That was actually a positive. But he would be dancing steps, very complicated, Cayley, they call the dances here, the Scottish dances. He would be dancing them in his sleep while I was playing, which I found really lovely and amazing. And then this couple, my favorite couple, which was, this a daughter and mother. The mother had dementia. She was in her mid-90s and very ill with chest infections. And the daughter, they did not get along. I mean, like the first number of them, the daughter sat, I can't really do it, but she was as far away in her seat. Like they were as far away from each other in the room as they could be. The mother, not so much, but the daughter was very not comfortable. By the time I went to do the 3 that I did live, and that happened that the daughter really, really loved classical music, and I knew that. So I threw in some more Bach than I maybe mostly would have at that time. And they became one. I mean, whatever I felt when I left there after like playing for like an hour and a half and finally stopping because it would have gone on for 2 out 3 4 hours. It was, here's a 95-year-old not well, and talk about that time span changing. She shouldn't have been more refreshed after being completely involved in something like this for an hour and a half, and she was. And I felt a real state of grace when I left. I felt like, well, I don't know if I'm going to ever get this PhD, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I did something good here, because they were stroking each other's hair and holding hands and singing, and they kept saying, this is like, she kept saying, this is like a dream, this is like a dream, which I can imagine it felt a little dreamlike to a 95-year-old in her care home with this weird cello thing. She'd never seen a cello before. It's rural Scotland. So yeah, that was very, very rewarding. I've had lots of those though.
Speaking of that, someone asked if you feel comfortable taking your best instruments into like nursing home environments.
Very good question. I don't ever bring Rita in. Rita's older than all the care home people put together practically, because she's from 1702. So she doesn't go with me to the care homes. I bought a 3/4, so a small cello that I'm now students using to use, that was good sounding to use in the care home bedrooms, because I was in very small spaces. And when I went into hospitals too, for the same reason, that is a problem with the cello. It's a problem with the big harps. They're big. Violins are a lot easier. Flutes are good because, I mean, all those little instruments I get a little jealous of, but I never had any danger. I would be a little reticent to take a really big instrument that is, like worth a lot, and that, especially in a hospital setting where there might be like somebody has to come in, they've got to use a crash cart or what, I would be a little nervous, but you can get around that.
And tagging right into that was, what are instruments that you see being used regularly? Maybe the question was what works and doesn't work, but what have you seen?
Everything can work. So for a long time, I knew about MHTP and didn't do it because I thought for sure it was just for harp players. I was certain of that for a long time. And it was really by happenstance that I found out it wasn't just for harps. That was so eye-opening, and I wish they would change the little insignia so that other people realize that, because my argument would be, I've seen amazing clarinetists. I've seen double bass, which I think would be hard working it out, but I've seen pretty much any instrument. I think it's about how, I will argue that particularly with dementia, the quality of your playing makes a huge difference. It seems counterintuitive in some ways, but actually you're trying to reach somebody that's more difficult to reach. And I'm going to tell you right now that it did make a difference. Like, that if you can really play your instrument, whatever instrument that is, to a good degree, I think any instrument could work. I think tuba, trombone, I think all of them could. Honestly.
There was a comment about memory loss and song lyrics, and the stories that I think several of us have heard about, songs coming back to people who otherwise are maybe not engaging or nonverbal. An experience or comments about those types of things?
I'm smiling a smile of people who are in this realm. I mean, that's what I always, so people will tell me always when they hear about what I do, oh yeah, my gran had dementia, and it was amazing. We'd play her this tune and she would sing along. That, and it's sort of like awakenings, and it can be a real power trip that you have to be careful of, because so people go into the care homes who are very well-meaning, and it's a really amazing thing to see this, yeah, if I play My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean here, I am going to guarantee you 100% that everybody in that room will know the words to it and will often do the gestures. I'm so used to that now that I take that for granted, actually. But I mean, I've played for people. There was a woman who I played for who, I mean, it was amazing. There would be the first note of anything. I can't even remember how many pieces I must have played for her. Any song I played for her that was from like whatever era, she recognized it within like one note, and she would sing along. and she knew every word of every verse. It was incredible to me because I'm pretty sure I don't know that much music as I am right now. But yes, music brings back words, and you can try this yourself. Go ahead. I mean, if you go listen to a piece of music, go listen to a pop song again from when you were 20, you may not have liked it, you may not have listened to it, and you're going to know the words. Period. Or from when you were a kid, You Are My Sunshine. I mean, you're going to know the words. It's how we learn the alphabet, right? I mean, it's how Gifford, there's a whole talk I give about, the way we use music to learn language is a really interesting and powerful one.
Well, this has been an hour, and so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I'm sure there are lots of stories. And if you have other questions, I have put Claire's website information in the chat, and we'll also include that in the description when we post this to YouTube, so that you can learn more about it. You can reach out if you have more specific questions. But I wanted to say thank you, Claire, again, for sharing your experiences, your expertise with us in this really meaningful way. And we're so glad that you were able to join us, even though it's as late as it is
Oh,
in
it's
Scotland.
okay. It's only 9 p.m. here.
It's only
not
9.
too bad.
It's only 9. Yeah. Being a Midwesterner, that's late, right?
Yeah, that's yes, and I really appreciate getting to do this. I'm just looking at the chat just briefly because will I get a copy of this chat?
We can give you a copy
That
of the
would be
chat.
great
Yes.
because I'd love to see. Yes, that's great because I'm seeing some interesting things in there. I would love to see. And do please get a hold of me through my email because if there's more questions or just to connect, it would be great. As you can
Wonderful.
tell, connection is my thing, so please do. Thank
Uh,
you very much. I'm really glad you guys took the time. I hope you got something from it.
And thank you everyone who joined us today. You can find out about other upcoming meetings and webinars and programming at earlymusicamerica.org. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter, eNotes, which comes out on Tuesdays. You can also become a member or donate to help support the mission of Early Music America and all of the programming that EMA does throughout all of North America and beyond with these types of webinars. So thank you once again for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.